What are optimal levels of B12? Hi, I'm Chris Masterjohn, and I have a PhD in nutritional sciences. I am not a medical doctor, and nothing contained in this episode may be construed as medical or nutritional advice of any kind, or a substitute therefore. This episode is meant purely as scientific education. If you wish to act on any ideas presented in this episode, please consult your physician first, and never take anything herein as a reason to contradict medical advice. With that said, enjoy the episode.
Okay, Aaron Phillips asks, optimal B12 levels? I know Dr. Gundry is fine with levels above 2,000 in his patients. In February, David Sinclair commented that his B12 was through the roof at 1483, with the optimal reference range on his lab stating 300 to 665. Also, optimal vitamin A levels, I noticed that the reference range on LabCorp for vitamin A used to go to 89.1 at the time the cheat sheet was written, but now the reference range only goes up to 57.3. So my last level of 59.7 is now considered high. Last question, how long does it take to reverse B6 toxicity? I've had tingling in my fingers and found out that my B6 is 52.5. I discontinued my prenatal vitamin, which is the only source of B6 that I'm taking other than that through the diet. Also taking ubiquinol and a DPQQ, but I don't believe any of this should be raising my B6. Okay, so B12 levels. Let me get my notes on B12 levels. And actually, I'll make a note to put this paper in the show notes. So there's a paper called The Pathophysiology of Elevated Vitamin B12 in Clinical Practice that Pam Schoenfeld, another Masterpass member, had given me. And this paper is very interesting because it identifies a bunch of things that high B12 can be an indicator of, not a causal factor in, but an indicator of problems. And it also disputes the low end of the range. So according to this paper, we really want B12 levels above 400 picograms per milliliter, which is 295 picomoles per liter. I believe picograms per milliliter is what most people's lab results come in. And that's like double what most labs are using for low levels, at least at the time this paper was written. I don't have it in my notes right here. Put that paper up. I believe it's like 1400 is where their cutoff lies for potentially indicating problems. Let me see real quick if I have this stored on my computer. I do. Okay, so they look at high serum B12 at above 950 picograms per milliliter. And they're looking at it from the possibility that it indicates potential problems with let's see, they have so I think the first thing to note is that I don't think that this means anything if you're supplementing with high dose B12. Pretty much anyone who's taking any B12 supplements is taking high dose B12. And I think if your B12 is high when you're taking B12 supplements, it's because you're taking B12 supplements and that's it. But the thing is, if you have very high B12 and you can't explain it with a B12 supplement, it really is not likely to be explained by your diet. Because remember, when you're taking like thousands of micrograms of B12, you are after a certain threshold, you're passively absorbing like 100th or 1,000th of the dose, and the more you jam in, the more you're absorbing. And so from food, you're not going to reach those levels, and you're not going to absorb more than the RDA for vitamin B12 at a meal. And so, if you eat 3 meals with the RDA, your B12 level is going to be higher than someone who has a lower B12 intake, but it's not going to be massively high. And so, I do think that some of the things that they list here are chronic myeloid leukemia, polycythemia vera, primary myelofibrosis, and a few other hematological disorders. And then there are then renal failure, liver disease, inflammatory diseases, and solid neoplasms are all possible conditions that could raise the B12 level. So my general opinion is if it's a little bit above the range, then you probably don't need to worry. But if it's substantially above the range, then if it's I think these levels were if it's 1483 picograms per milliliter, I agree that's through the roof. And if Sinclair's taking a B12 supplement, I would just ignore it and attribute it to the B12 supplement. If you really, really want to be absolutely certain that there's no other issue it's indicating, then you can cut out the supplement for a few weeks, test it again, it should go down. But if someone is not supplementing and they have levels that high, I would take a look at all the potential, a hematological disorder, a liver disorder, a kidney disorder, or a cancer as possible reasons for the B12 being elevated. But I honestly think that and anecdotally, someone asked me one time whether low carb diets could raise B12 levels, and had a hypothesis for why, which was interesting, but I don't think it's been tested. But bottom line is, if it's a tiny bit elevated, probably you can ignore it. If it's up like 1,400 picograms per milliliter or more, and you're supplementing, it's probably the supplement. If you're not supplementing, you haven't been supplementing in the last few months, then that's a little weird, and you should investigate kidney problems, liver problems, blood problems, cancers. And if everything checks out good, then I would just go back to ignoring it. I don't know why it's high, but if it's not one of those things, then it doesn't really matter. Optimal vitamin A levels, I have no basis to change anything from what's listed in the cheat sheet. In fact, in the course of researching for Vitamins and Minerals 101, I'm inclined to actually raise not necessarily the blood level, but the dietary recommendations for vitamin A. And so I don't know what LabCorp was looking at, but I think that I don't think the research supports that people are consuming too much vitamin A. I think the research supports that, a lot of people are getting enough if they convert good carotenoids well. And if they don't, they're probably not going to. The B6 was probably elevated because of your prenatal. If you've been taking B6 recently and the B6 is elevated, I don't think it means anything. I also don't know of any conditions that are tied to high B6 blood levels. The tingling could be from the B6, might not be from the B6. Main test would be if the prenatal vitamin goes away and the tingling goes away, then it probably was something in the prenatal vitamin. And if B6 was elevated, B6 goes down, B6 would be a candidate for explaining why. All right. Thank you, Aaron, for your question. Hope that helps.
This episode was part of a Q&A for members of the CMJ Masterpass, a buyer's club with exclusive and massive discounts on your favorite premium foods and health products, including pasture-raised and wild meat and seafood, supplements, sleep accessories, water filters, phototherapy devices, and much more. As a bonus, you also get to participate in monthly private Zoom Q&As with me. You can join the Masterpass at chrismasterjohnphd.com/masterpass and use the code Q&A, spelled out as Q-A-N-D-A, Q&A, for a 10% lifetime discount. For the remainder of 2020, I will be working full-time on finishing my Vitamins and Minerals 101 book while reserving a portion of my time for consulting clients. You can pre-order my book at chrismasterjohnphd.com/book. In my consulting, I am neither a medical practitioner nor a coach. I serve as your data analyst and your strategist. I teach you scientific principles of health and wellness, help you analyze your data, and help brainstorm actionable strategies. You can sign up for a consultation at chrismasterjohnphd.com/consultations. I will try to respond to comments here when I can, but my presence will be intermittent while I'm finishing my book. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next episode.